New possibilities are opening up for science space as Discovery clears the tower.
Discovery, go and throttle up.
Discovery, roger, go for deploy.
Thanks to you and to everybody in the shuttle program. The crew is go for launch.
Roger, nice to be in orbit.
We have followed in their footsteps to get us where we are today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Megan Cruz, and thank you for watching NASA's SpaceX Crew-7 social panel. Crew-7 will launch to the International Space Station this Friday, August 25th at 3:50 in the morning Eastern Time. It's the first time in a single launch that each person represents a different space agency. So you have Jasmine Mogbelli of NASA, you have Andreas Mogensen of the European Space Agency, Satoshi Furukawa, JAXA, and also Konstantin Borisev of Roscosmos. So today's audience here in the room is a group of digital content creators visiting NASA's Kennedy Space Center for a NASA social, is what we call it. They'll get a behind-the-scenes tour, and they're now getting to meet this interesting panel of people I have with me here today. So to my left, we have Tom Engler. He's the Center Planning and Development Director at Kennedy Space Center. Then next to him, we have Kristin Fabre, Deputy Chief Scientist for NASA's Human Research Program based at Johnson Space Center. Then we have Luca Parmitano. He's an ESA astronaut. And Sam Testa, Recovery Director for the Commercial Crew Program SpaceX missions based here at Kennedy. So they'll be taking questions live from our audience, but you can also join in virtually by using the hashtag AskNASA, and we hope that you do. Okay, so let's kick things off with some opening remarks. Tom, we'll start with you. Tell everybody a little bit about what you do here at Kennedy.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Kennedy. My name is Tom Engler. I am the Director of Center Planning and Development here at Kennedy Space Center, and our job is to do partnership development with commercial companies and other government agencies, along with performing master planning for the center. And master planning, for those of you that don't know, is the process of planning out the center to ensure that the development we are able to do here on center is within the boundaries of the type of activities that need to occur here and occur in the areas that they need to occur.
And it sounds like you have a big job. I mean, we have a lot of great things going for us in the future for NASA, this agency, so you have a lot on your shoulders right now.
It's a great cooperative effort across the agency to make these things happen, but when you look at the transition that's happened since the end of the shuttle program, all you have to do is drive through the center and look at all of the activities that are going on that are commercial activities, and those are all since the end of the shuttle program. And so the center and the agency pitched in together to try to enable the commercial space activities that are happening here.
Yeah, really exciting stuff, and I'm sure a lot of people have some questions about
Absolutely.
that. All right, so Kristin, you're the, again, Deputy Chief Scientist for NASA's Human Research Program. So tell us about this program and what exciting new research is happening with Crew-7.
All right, thank you. So the Human Research Program, we focus on how to keep the crew healthy and how they maintain and optimize their performance for space exploration. So we're very focused on Artemis, we're focused on Mars and beyond. But we're very interested in how we work and do research on the International Space Station, because that informs us of what type of risk or what type of hazards we need to think about for space exploration. So one of those big studies that's coming up on Crew-7 is called CIPHER. And what that is actually taking 4 different studies, 14 different studies, and putting them all into this integrated research complement. And so not only do we want to understand what happens to the body in space for duration, so 6 months or maybe up to a year, we can look at the eyes, changes in vision, changes in the muscle performance, exercise, all of the different biomarkers when it comes to bone health or just into overall health in general, but how all of that connects together. So how does nutrition impact exercise? How does that impact mood? What's happening to the changes in vision because of microgravity? So trying to do this integrated science approach. It's very complicated. We have a lot of partners. We actually partner with international agencies as well. And so we're really excited to get this kicked off. We'll have a second person on this with Crew-7, so excited to see what kind of data we come up with.
Yeah, it's really important to take a look at this because we know from previous, human research studies that the body does change while it's in space.
Yes, absolutely. And what we love for the International Space Station, or just low Earth orbit research, is a great analog for microgravity. You can't really do that for a long period of time on Earth. And so we can look at a lot of different things here on Earth. Isolation, we have different radiation facilities that can simulate some galactic cosmic radiation. So these are unique hazards we have to think about for space flight, space exploration. But the low Earth orbit, the International Space Station, is a fantastic way to study the impact of microgravity on the body. So very excited about this research.
Yeah. And Luca knows about spaceflight. So tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming an ESA astronaut.
Yeah, my name is Luca Parmitano. I'm from Italy. I am a colonel in the Italian Air Force, and I'm a test pilot for the Italian Air Force. But in 2009, my career changed drastically when I was selected as one of the 2009 class of the European astronauts, the Shenanigans. As a matter of fact, Andy Mogensen, the pilot, is one of my classmates from the same class. And I was privileged enough to fly twice to the space station in 2013 with Expedition 3637, and then in 2019 with Expedition 6061. I was the commander of Expedition 61. And so, yeah, I do know a few things about the International Space Station. Space. I spent exactly 1 year in orbit, 366 days, sometimes being the subject of the research that.
Thank you for that.
Oh, no, absolutely. And right now, I'm here in one of my many capacities. I think it's fitting that being bold, I wear many hats. One of the, other than being an astronaut, I'm also, I will be the increment lead for Expedition 70. So I will be the crew rep on the ground. I will be basically a member of the crew, but on the ground, trying to make sure that the planning and the workload and the timings are done correctly. Having lived it myself, so making sure that we put the human at the center of human space flight, and also so that we don't exaggerate too much with making them field lab rats.
When you said increment lead, what is that?
So an increment is the full time that a crew is on the space station. At the beginning, I said that was part of Expedition 3637. That period of time, which was 166 days, and then 6061, 200 days, those are increment. And usually we talk about increments because an expedition depends on when a spacecraft goes on the space station and comes back, while an increment is the full time that a crew is on the space station.
I understand. Okay, thank you so much. And last but not least, we have Sam. So Sam, talk to us about what you do for NASA's Commercial Crew Program. It has to do with recovery.
Sure, yeah. I am the NASA Recovery Director for the Crew-6 and Crew-7 missions. I lead and coordinate the NASA team who joins the SpaceX team when we bring the crew home from the International Space Station. So for Crew-7, we have a team that's on call through launch, docking, and hatch open to make sure that the crew has no issues getting on station so they can start their work. If they were to have a trouble attaching to the docking to the space station and being able to get on board, our team would be called up to bring them home if they had that issue. So we have a team on call here at Kennedy Space Center. And then for Crew-6, for the crew that's currently on station, we have a team that's getting ready to plan and coordinate bringing them home about 5 days after Crew-7 gets on board.
So it's really important for you to watch for that handover as well, it sounds like, not just the recovery aspect.
Yep, we are paying attention through all of the launch operations, through launch itself. We'll be, several of our team members will be on console for docking and hatch opening as well to make sure that everything is going as planned. And then once that successfully is completed, we'll switch over to Crew-6 and get ready to bring those guys home and back to their families.
Awesome. So was I right? Interesting panel? Yeah? Good group of people? All right, guys, so let's start with some questions. So if you just raise your hand here in the room, and we'll get to you. And then we also have the folks online. I'll just remind them, again, #AskNASA. Okay, so right over there, and feel free to direct it to anyone or if it's open to the whole panel.
Yeah, so my question is related to everyone, but I'm really excited about CIPHER. That's like my favorite program in NASA. But I wanted to know, how do the astronauts adapt to the sleep schedule change? Because it is my understanding that it does take time for your circadian rhythm to adjust. And I do know that when you are in a sleep deficit, that cognitive issues can come up and their decision-making can be impaired. So how do we adjust and correct for some sleep deficit issues? And I also wanted to know, do astronauts dream differently in space?
Do you want to start with that?
I would have to say that if you ask 5 astronauts that question, you get 6 answers. It's hard to, I don't think you can really define different. I dream differently every night, so I would say that in orbit, yeah, I dream differently, just like I do on the ground. I don't remember specifically dreaming of the Earth or of space while I was in orbit. The same way, I don't remember dreaming more or less of space, or I definitely daydream more about space when I'm on the ground. But I think your question is more about what we dream doing, and I don't think it's different. Now that question is very useful for dreaming, but now sleeping is very different. And I would say that what struck me the most about sleeping is not exactly the part where you don't feel that you're sleeping, but those special moments when you're about to fall asleep or about to wake up. That's when it's really different, because you have a little bit of conscience, but you're still in that sleepless phase, and that's when you understand that your brain is doing all sorts of tricks to make sure that you can sleep and rest. And I don't know if we have time to delve into that, but I can be very quick and say, your body needs a lot of different signals to fall asleep. You have to lay down. You have to feel the mattress on your back. Those are all triggers that tell your brain that it's time to sleep. And instead, in orbit, you can lay down because all the orientations are the same. You cannot have anything to lay on because you don't lay. But your body will trick your brain into believing that. Because I remember that as I was waking up, I felt the pressure of the mattress on my back, but what it was just a sleeping bag touching my skin, and it was enough to trigger that same sensation. And then the moment you realize it, it disappears instantaneously. So that's when I realized that the body is really amazing. It does things that are necessary for you to recover and to have a good night's sleep. And it doesn't take long to adjust. I would say that if you go camping often, if you go trekking, you know that it probably takes 3 days for you to get a good night's sleep in a tent when you're away or anywhere else. It's the same in orbit. The first couple of nights you wake up, you are confused, you take time to fall asleep. Then after 3 days, your body says, okay, this is it. This is how I need to sleep, and it will do what it needs to fall asleep. About the dreaming, I'd say, for me, I don't think it's any different other than always being different. Sorry, long-winded answer, and probably delved into a territory that was different from what you expected.
No, I was actually going to ask you, how is sleeping different? So I'm glad you went into that, and I think y'all thought that was pretty interesting as well. So this segues nicely into Cypher, so go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm really glad that you mentioned those cues, because that's actually one of the things that we study at the Human Research Program. Is we actually have a whole element, a discipline of subject matter expertise that focus on sleep research that actually falls under behavioral medicine. And so behavior and mental health is going to be very important for us, both in low Earth orbit, but also for those exploration missions. And so there's a lot of research that's going into the cues, what needs to help with sleep. And so is that lighting? Is that sound? A station can be kind of noisy. And so just trying to have the right cues to help maximize sleep, to help with crew performance and crew health is very important to us. And that also goes into a lot of our other different risks or hazards, or how we need to think about crew performance and health on space, because sleep impacts mood, it impacts team performance, it impacts health, it can impact stress. And so this is definitely an area of interest for us that we study, and we work a lot with our astronauts in trying to understand how best we can understand their experience and what we need to do to help the research so that they are making sure they get the best sleep possible.
To go specifically into your question, though, about the sleep shifting, It's just a matter of adjusting. Crews do it differently, if I may. Some crew prefer what they call a slam shift. They basically understand the launch day is going to be a very long day, and they prep for it the same way you would if you know that you're just going to work for a very long day for some reason. And the body can adjust to that. There are ways. One way would be coffee, for example. If you are a coffee drinker, you get an extra coffee and it keeps you awake for a little longer. Other crews they do some adjustment. They sleep shift before the launch. This is what the crew is doing right now, for example. And there are studies that come from the research that HRP does, and there are a lot of studies about sleep shifting. And what they do is basically follow a routine where they adjust the lighting, the food, the routine, the workouts, everything. They adjust everything in order to put the body in the position to wake up at the right time so that they are perfectly ready for the launch and orbit insertion operations, and then later on for the docking. And in orbit, they have the same option. They can sleep shift or they can do a slam shift. It depends. Every crew has a little different preference, and we have flight surgeons on the ground that can help us with that.
Thank you for your question. All right, we have her in the room here.
Hi, my question's for Luca. My little brother Jack wanted me to ask you this. He wanted to know, how many languages do you speak? And what's it like working with astronauts that come from different cultural backgrounds and different first languages?
Right. So for the first question, I think I only speak one language. I speak Italian. I speak English. I speak French relatively well. I speak Russian relatively well. I do dab in some Spanish, but mostly because I was an exchange student in California, and a lot of my friends were South Americans, and so they would speak Italian to me. I speak Spanish to them. And then I recently studied some German, about 2 years of German. And at one point I was studying Chinese, but that didn't work. Let's put it that way. I got about 90 hours of Chinese, and it just wasn't enough to sustain. I then had to start getting ready for flight, and I didn't have enough time to dab into other languages. And then for the second question, I think it's magic. You can come from a lot of different backgrounds. Think about what's in orbit right now. We have 3 Russians, we have 2 Americans, and we have the second astronaut for the Arab Emirates, Sultan. I know them all. One of them actually is a very good friend of mine. I was able to meet his family in Russia while training, and they all come from very different backgrounds. They are scientists, they are engineers, they are military personnel. But they have one thing in common that breaks down any barrier, and it's the common dream. I'm not talking about the night dream. I'm talking about the one that you live every day and think about. And that's human exploration. It's pushing the boundaries of what we know as humans. And they all have that common dream. And there's nothing more powerful than a dream to unite. So it breaks down every barrier. You start your journey as an astronaut as an individual. You start training as an individual. Then you join your team, and you become a crew. And that's how you launch. You launch as a crew. And then throughout the flight, you bond with the rest of your crew members, and you come back as brothers and sisters. So really, it is magic. And how do you deal with it? Well, a common language obviously helps a lot. On the space station, we speak what we like to call Ranglish. It's a mix of English and Russian, and it's not because we like to be cool and switch from one to the other. It's because as we train, we become used to talk about the environment that surrounds us in the language that it was made. So the US segment is mostly English terms for anything from food to everyday use, the toilet, the experiments. But then if you go into Kibo, which is the Japanese segment, a lot of the hardware is in Japanese. So you will just say, oh yeah, the Ryutaki experiment. And I don't know what it means, but that's how I call it. And if you go into the Russian segment, obviously we do a lot of training in the Russian segment, and we're used to call all the equipment in Russian. And so it'd be funny to listen to a conversation when we are having dinner on a Saturday night all together as a crew. We talk about one thing or another. Hey, why don't you pass me the tvorak? And if I say that, I'm probably going to say it in Russian because I'm thinking about the Russian cheese, and that's how it comes to my mind. And it's this ebb and flow from one language to the other. So how you break the language, how you break the barriers, it's through a common language. There are many common languages. Music is one, math is another one. They are universal languages. And then passion, I think, is another language that joins whether or not you speak it.
That's great. It's great to see those bonds, right, that are created out of the dream for space exploration, like you said. I know there's a lot in the room. I just want to take one from online really quick. So this is for you, Tom. Kennedy is launching lots of rockets by numerous providers. Is it exciting that Kennedy is the spaceport making that possible? And do you expect to see more commercial use of KSC in the future?
It is absolutely exciting. When you look at the end of the shuttle program, we had one vehicle flying out of Kennedy. That was a space shuttle, and you had the Atlas V and Delta IV off of the Space Force Station. And now when you look at the suite of launch vehicles that are flying from basically the Space Coast, it is anywhere from the smallest launch vehicle carrying a few hundred pounds to the super heavy like the SLS is. And so, and soon to be, you'll see SpaceX launching their super heavy, Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy. It's an exciting time to be here. And what's really neat is when you see the transition to the center since then, you are seeing an environment that exists nowhere else here on Earth. And that is that you have 4 companies here doing human spaceflight activities. You see SpaceX, and they're obviously getting ready to launch their Crew Dragon. Boeing with CST-100. Blue Origin is getting ready to launch their vehicles, and they will soon be human capable. And of course, Artemis with the Orion capsule on top. That environment exists nowhere else in the world, and so seeing that happen here, being a part of that, and being that global center of space flight is truly amazing. So, yeah, it's an exciting time to be here, and it's only going to get more exciting. We're also doing manufacturing here. The companies are doing manufacturing. In the past, we would get vehicles come to us, we would assemble them, launch them. Now, again, you have Blue Origin manufacturing here. You'll eventually have other launch vehicle companies manufacturing here. We have satellites being built at Kennedy and other activities like that. So, again, it's truly an amazing time to be here, and seeing the center come in behind this activity that allows both government and commercial spaceflight and spaceflight activities to happen here has just been amazing.
Yeah. Aren't you guys excited you're going to tour Kennedy today with all of that? Yeah. Let's take some in the room here, right over here.
Hi, this question's for Luca. Thank you so much, everyone. My question and curiosity always for space is, it's 2 questions. How does it feel when you're launching, like physically? And then what is your emotional, if you recall, feelings or experience once you were in space?
Oh, you better believe that I recall it. It's quite impossible to forget. So, as you know, humans do not feel in a linear way. We just don't. We feel a lot of things at the same time. Even if I asked you, hey, what did you feel the first time you saw the sea? You wouldn't be able to tell me one thing. You would have to tell me about the smell, the feeling of the wind on your skin, the breeze, the salt in the air, so many different things, the light, the sparkling in the water. So it's really hard to describe feelings. What I can do is very quickly take you with me inside the spacecraft. You have to imagine that I flew on the Soyuz, and the Soyuz is very, very quiet right before the launch. It's almost, we listen to some music before the launch, and then it becomes very quiet. And we're just waiting for the signals. There is no countdown in Russian, but there are some keywords that we expect that tell us that it's about to happen. And there is this tension as the spacecraft kind of sway with the wind. You know something is happening, and you're strapped in. from a physical point of view, you're not moving. But then from an emotional point of view, I remember it felt like being two different people at the same time. There was Luca the astronaut. I had been training for 2 years for that moment, for the launch, and I knew every single aspect of the spacecraft. I knew my checklist. I knew what I had to do. And then there was a 6-year-old Luca next to me. And that was a kid that had dreamed of being an astronaut for 30 years and couldn't quite believe that it was happening. So as soon as the rocket becomes alive, it's this trembling, because you cannot hear the noise. It's behind you, 40 meters behind you, but the vibration travels through the structure and they hit your seat and you start shaking with it. And then you have this giant hand pushing you down into the seat, and that's acceleration. It goes through two phases. The first one peaks at 4.3 Gs, so 4.5 times your body weight pressing down on you. It's not a lot, but it's a lot more than we are used to. And then there is a moment of release as the first stage drops down and you start accelerating again. It's a little less on the second part. And it pushes you up, and again, it's incredibly steady. The launch on the Soyuz is very, very, very steady acceleration, not a lot of vibrations. And again, you have this professional side of you, just making sure that all the check marks are hit, all the timings. You know when the fairings are going to go away. You know when some of the markers are going to happen, and you make sure that all the timings are correct. And then you're just marveling at the same time, is this really happening? In a way, it feels like the hundreds of simulations you have done where everything always went wrong and everything is going right. So that's a nice change. And then you're marveling that it's really happening. And then 8 minutes and 48 seconds later, it's the main engine cut off. In Russian, it's called контакт отделения. It's the separation from all the stages, and all at once you have a pencil in your hand and you let it go, and it floats. And in the Russian tradition, we have little toy animals brought by the commander or the other crew members as microgravity indications, and they start floating. And sure enough, you're in orbit, and it just happened. 8 minutes and 48 seconds. You were at 0 ground, 0 speed, and now you're traveling in 28,000 kilometers an hour, 17,500 miles an hour, and you're 150 miles in the sky. And I couldn't wait. We had little covers for the windows. I took that off, and I looked outside, and I saw my first orbital sunrise. We launched at 1 o'clock in the morning, but 8 minutes later we were in Kazakhstan, but 8 minutes later we were already in Japan. And it was the sunrise. And I cannot describe it because there are no words. Simply, there are no words in the languages that we have developed, because our words describe things that we have experienced. And we haven't experienced anything like that. But I saw it, I turned around, and I saw that my crewmates who had already flown, they were not looking outside. They were looking at me. They were looking at me because I was the only one that had not flown yet. And I saw this big smile on their faces, and I realized that was the same smile that I had, because it was like this amazing grace and beauty in front of us, and just beautiful. So hard to describe in words, but I hope I took you with me for those 8 minutes and 43 seconds.
That's only 8 minutes and 43 seconds. What a wonderful question, and thank you for that perspective. I do want to take one other online. This is for Sam. So as a recovery director, what is the hardest part of your training?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think I wouldn't call it necessarily the hardest, but the most challenging and the most interesting aspect of training for the recovery missions is the helicopter underwater egress training that we do over in Houston. Everyone, because we take helicopters out from the airport to the recovery vessel prior to deorbit burn of the capsule, That helicopter over water is considered somewhat of a risk in case the helicopter were to have an issue and we were to land. Helicopters traditionally don't fare well underwater. So to mitigate that risk, we have everyone go on helicopter underwater training. We call it Hewitt. And they basically put you in a very big pool with a rig that looks like the inside of a helicopter. They put you in a life vest with a HEEDS bottle, which has air, almost like a teeny tiny scuba tank. And then they strap you in a seat. They lift you up in this big container, basically at that point. They drop you into the water, and then they flip you upside down. And you have to get out underwater. Yeah. Yeah, so everyone does this, and it's just in case the helicopter has an issue. We've had many, many missions at this point and no problems. Everyone traditionally does fantastic in the training, but it is a challenging day. We spend about half of it in the classroom, half of it in the pool. You have water up your nose the entire time.
Not in the classroom.
Not in the classroom. You're right, not in the classroom, just in the pool. But it makes the missions, that's really when the mission starts to feel real. It's the first active thing you do that isn't in meetings or things along those lines, getting ready to bring the crew home. So at that point, it starts to feel a little bit more real, and you start to recognize that we're operational now.
Wow, that's the first active thing. That's a very challenging active thing to start, but they don't start you off easy.
It gets easier from there.
Okay. All right, we'll go back in the room here. This one over here.
Thank you. Hi, this is a question for Luca. So I'm from Denmark, and we are, of course, following Andy's mission coming up.
I wonder why.
I don't know why. So you try to be the commander and just a kind of regular astronaut at the space station, and we are really excited for him to become the commander. How is the experience and work life different from being kind of a regular astronaut on the space station and then having to be the commander of the space station?
So I would say that it was an incredible privilege, an honor, and a challenge to be the commander on the space station. There are two teams, but there's many, many teams, but operational every day, on a day-to-day basis, you have two teams that work to make sure that everything on orbit gets accomplished. One team is on the ground, and it's called the Flight Control Team. It sits mainly at MCC, Mission Control Center in Houston, and then it's spread all over for other control centers. And then there is a crew on orbit. And it's a very integrated team. As the station commander, you are responsible for the safety of your crew members, the safety of the vehicle, and the accomplishment of the mission. And then the flight director is the equivalent of the commander on the space station. He's on the ground, and he's responsible for the crew safety, the vehicle safety, and the accomplishment of the mission. So how do you have two people doing the same job at the same time? We take care of different things. The commander on the space station is a first among peers, primus inter pares. It's a very old expression. It means you are integrated with your team, but you are responsible for them. And I would say that the main job of the commander, one of the most important jobs of the commander, is to make sure that there is a very open flow of communication. I would say that to make sure that you do a good job as a commander, you have to allow every crew member to perform at the best of their capabilities. And you do that by knowing them, by giving them all the freedom. You are trained as an astronaut, but so are they. Even if you are a flown astronaut, within 2 weeks, everybody has the same experience that you have. So it's being the commander is not like you're issuing orders. You're not issuing commands. You are responsible for the communication between the ground and the space station, and you have to make sure that everybody's talking to everybody on orbit. Because, like I said earlier, you get to the space station and you're a crew. But then you're going to live, perform, act with the same people in a very enclosed space for a very long time. You get to know them better than your siblings. I said you come back as a family. That's true, with the same challenges. You're not always happy with your family. You're not always happy with your dad, your mom, your siblings. And you have to manage that. And in order to do that, I would say that there are lots of different tricks. Communication is one, getting personal space, understanding that sometimes you need your own personal space, and adjusting the schedule so that everybody can have that. That is part of my job on the ground, as a matter of fact, as the increment lead, to make sure that that is taken into consideration. But of course, the ultimate integrator of the work on orbit is the crew. So as the commander, I would say that Andy's main challenge, especially flying with 2 unflown crew members for the first time, and then he's going to get another unflown crew member in September. And Satoshi, he's an experienced crew member, but he flew in a very different space station many years ago. So even for him, it's going to be challenging to get back into the flow of things. So, and these challenges are going to be making sure that everybody has the understanding that they have the competence, the capabilities, the talent to perform their job, and they have to, and do it well. He's not going to be supervising them. He will be the glue that holds it together. So it's a challenging experience, but more on the human aspect than on the technical side. All the technical side is already challenging enough, but they are trained for that. There is no training you can do to be the commander. But knowing Andy, I've known him for a long time. We are classmates. He's a super fun guy. He's quick to laugh with his very quirky laugh, and he loves a good joke. And those are all things that in his personality that will help him in his task as commander.
Thank you for that question. Over here.
So like most, if not all of us in the room, I grew up just fascinated by space and the space program. And Luca, I loved when you were sharing your story about how during launch you felt like 2 people. You were experiencing it in the moment, and you were also feeling the feelings of 6-year-old Luca. So for the rest of the panel, I would love to know from each of you just kind of what's the first thing that made you fall in love with the space station or with the space program, and what is an experience that you've had now in your career that's sort of taken you back to that moment as a little kid? Like, what do you pinch yourself and say, wow, I can't believe I get to do this for my job?
Yeah.
I started my love of space and why I wanted to come work at NASA started with my grandfather. He was an engineer and an inventor, and he loved space. He would take me outside, you know, after dinner with the family and point out all of the constellations. And since I was little, that passion of his transferred to me, and I'd always wanted to work at NASA. I can't point out one moment where I pinched myself. I started as an intern, and so I think the first time I ever had to pinch myself was driving over the NASA Causeway. On my GPS, seeing that it said NASA Causeway was just overwhelming at the time, because it was the first time that I had ever been on a NASA center as somebody who was working for NASA. And then driving up to the VAB for the first time was incredible. It's just such an overwhelming building. The amount of awe and knowing all of the history inside of it is just, it's one of those things that you don't see anywhere else. And then now today, when we're going to get a crew home and we're getting ready to get on those helicopters, when you see the capsule re-enter the atmosphere and you see the parachutes come out, you see the splashdown for the SpaceX capsule into the water, and you see the faces of the crew when you open the hatch for the first time. It's hard not to be consistently pinching yourself. I feel like I should have bruises because there are just so many moments that feel surreal in the moment. Like you were saying, you're trained for it, but that younger version of you is right next to you, amazed at what you're doing and the fact that it's real.
So I still pinch myself, I think, too. Every time I go onto our Johnson Space Center campus, I show them my badge, and then they let me in. And that is so crazy to me. I can't believe that still happens to me. And I think that I hope that always stays with me. I hope that I'm always just like, wow, I still can't believe I'm here. So I'm a child of the 80s, and growing up with like E.T., Space Camp, a lot of these space shows that were like kind of really kid-geared, and they helped with inspiration on what could be. And then getting older and growing up, one thing that I've always loved about sci-fi and movies around space travel is the diversity that's always included there. men, women, backgrounds, aliens. It's very diverse. And it also coupled with innovation. And that's another passion of mine is innovation. How are we looking at research? How are we looking at technology that drives the betterment of humankind? And to me, space research, space exploration it marries all of those passions together. So the inspiration of just exploration, but then innovation, and then the tolerance and the welcoming of just diverse backgrounds and people coming together for a common mission I still love it.
So I grew up in Huntsville, Alabama, at Marshall Space Flight Center, and my dad is actually is a charter member of Marshall Space Flight Center. He's in that first group of folks that work for Marshall, and so I grew up in that environment. All of my friends, their parents worked in that environment. When I think I was probably 9 or 10, parents brought me down here for launch, Apollo Soyuz launch, so that was pretty cool. And then when I was 13, I remember my dad taking me out to Marshall as they were doing he was responsible, he was a structures engineer, responsible for Saturn first stage and then design of the structures for the solid rocket boosters for shuttle, going out to Marshall and seeing an aft skirt for the shuttle program there, and all the engineers were climbing around it, trying to make sure everything was fitting the way it was supposed to fit, that the design they had designed was actually being manufactured properly, and that was just fascinating to me. So started to work at Marshall, actually doing data system design, and then came down here to work actually still for Marshall in the resident office here for the shuttle program. So got to start working with the boosters that my dad helped design. So it was really, really cool, kind of a full circle moment for me. But I have to agree, every day you drive out here, you get to, sometimes you get a little lost in what you're doing day to day. But the thing I always connect with is when I give tours, because people are in here going, this is amazing. And you're right. Yeah, it really is, because this is amazing what we're doing here. Launches, the work that has to go into it, the precision that has to happen because you cannot make a mistake, and the designs that have to be able to pull all that together, and then the operations team, the recovery, the astronauts, everybody has to work together doing the right thing. And when you think about that machine that is the space program in general, it's just awe-inspiring. The fact that it works as well as it does, and we're able to pull things together the way we do and make things happen and deal with the day-to-day kind of issues that come up and recover those, it's fantastic. It's a great place to be, and again, seeing the growth of Kennedy Space Center over the last 12 years since the end of the shuttle program, again, seeing it change, having the folks at the center adapt to really what amounts to a new mission, both supporting government and commercial space flight. Yeah, it's just amazing. And so, yeah, there's not a day you just don't think, man, I'm lucky,
Okay, over here.
So this is for everybody, from day-to-day operations in space, also research. Of course, there's lots of training, lots of preparations, planning, can't make a mistake, but is there anything or something that has really surprised you or that you didn't expect to go that way?
Yeah, everybody's looking at me now. So I think, again, when you look at surprises, and I'll go back to, for me, one of those surprise moments was in 2010 when the Constellation program was canceled. So that was the follow-on program to shuttle for Kennedy, and that was that moment for Kennedy where we realized we had to find a different path for the center. So, I think from a surprise standpoint, and then going through that growing process of working with the center, working with this management team to help transform the center. That's, for me, that's been the last 12 years of my career, 13 years almost now, and being a part of that, again, having that surprise, but then digging in and doing the hard work to make the changes as a center, and kind of dragging the agency along with us to become this multi-user spaceport. Again, that shows what we can do when we are challenged, and that we're able to transition and do different things than what we've done before. Because, you know, that's what we're doing now is a lot the same, but a lot different than what we used to be as Kennedy Space Center. So it's an exciting time.
I'll go back to the example that we've been talking about with Cypher, since that's going to be highlighted. It surprised me at how complicated and complex and how many obstacles and challenges that were overcome in order for Cypher to become real. I've had a past life at other agencies and private-public partnerships, and I know that things can get complicated when you're dealing with other partners. But because of the fact that there's 14 studies here, and so that means that there's 14 lead PIs, but then each investigator, each head researcher has their own team. And then you partner with international partnerships, and then that's just on the research side. That's not including the astronauts and the ISS program and all of the rest of the agency that we have to partner with for this complex research that we need to do. So I was very surprised at how that had to happen and how many years that took for this to become real. But because this is such an important research complement, we really needed to do it. And we're excited that for the first time we can actually really start thinking about that data management and this integrated research study that I think is going to be the future of how we do a lot of our human research.
I'm actually going to jump a little bit on that, talking about complexity. I am surprised daily by myself also, and everybody that surrounds me, how quickly we tend to forget how complex this is, how difficult it is to make it happen. We have a tendency, I think it's human, to take a lot of it for granted, and it's not. It's not easy. You see the astronauts. We are normal humans. We are probably some of the most normal humans you can find on the Earth, and that's why we're selected. And we are visible because we are humans, but it's easy to forget that there is an incredible amount of people working behind the scenes to make a launch like Fridays happen. And every day, especially now that I'm seeing from the other side, there are endless operations ongoing before, during, and after to make sure that we can make this happen. And when I say we, I'm talking about all of us, including the public. Your support is indispensable, and your understanding that it's an incredibly complex task is also indispensable. And because the people behind the scenes are so good, they are incredibly good. I get to talk to them every day. Most of my working days, I talk to the best people in the field that do their job. And because they're so good, they make it look easy. They do. But it's not. It's really hard. The rocket that's going to launch on Friday is made of 1 million moving parts. And if every single part has a 1 in a million chance to fail, there's still something that's going to fail. And the people on the ground, they make sure that it doesn't. And even if it does, that the crew is safe. And accidents still happen. I had myself some, I would say, hairy experience, but it's maybe not appropriate. But I had some challenging times in my career. And if I'm here talking, it's because the people on the ground, they train us, they make the spacesuit, that build with their hands, the rockets, all the parts. It's because they're so good. And they make it look easy, but it's complex. And so I marvel that we forget how complex it is and we take it for granted.
I can speak from one perspective of somebody on the ground. It is complex. And I think for every mission, we spend loads of time planning and scheduling and making sure that everyone is trained and everyone is as prepared as they can be. But every mission, something comes up. It's the name of the game is flexibility, and that's everyone's middle names on these missions. It's finding ways around or through or past the changes that are happening, the things that are coming up. every mission has something different, and so we make a plan, we execute the plan, we expect something in the plan to go off the rails, and then we make a new plan, and all in the name of bringing the crew home and keeping the joint team safe. So yes, every time there is something that is unexpected, something surprising, something that we end up having to work through. And it's not always the same magnitude. Sometimes it's little things, sometimes it's bigger things. But we all put our best foot forward, and we have that joint passion, that joint mission to bring everybody home safely, to get everybody to space safely. And so we have thus far, and I expect we'll continue to find our way through.
Sounds like teamwork and passion and determination really make the dream work, right? So that's what I took from all of that. I'm so sorry, guys. We are actually out of time. We actually went over time. I wish we could take all your questions, but I know you guys in the room have an exciting day ahead of you. You still have your tour of Kennedy Space Center. So I do want to mention that if you are a digital content creator interested in joining a NASA social, you can apply for our next event here at Kennedy, and that is the Psyche NASA Social. You'll see a QR code pop up on your screen here. You can scan that for details or also visit nasa.gov/social. The Psyche mission is scheduled for October 5th and will journey to a unique metal-rich asteroid orbiting the sun between Mars and Jupiter. And we are accepting those NASA social applications now through Monday, August 28th. So again, a huge thank you to the panelists, to everybody in the room here, to those who asked questions online. Remember, we're here for Crew-7, so launch coverage of that will begin at 11:45 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow, Thursday, August 24th, and you can watch that on nasa.gov/live. Hope you can join us.